Hello, I'm author and founder of the Right Women Book Fest, Heather Brooks, and today I'm honored to have a conversation with UK award-winning author, poet, and playwright Joelle Taylor about her book Konto and Othered Poems, which is actually a play made of poems. To read Joelle's full biography and bibliography, visit the About section of her website, joelletaylor.co.uk. We'll post that in the video links. Joelle, thank you so much for participating with our little book fest this year. We're honored to have you.
It's an absolute joy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Heather.
This book is unlike anything I've ever read, and I've read quite a few plays, and of course I'm a book lover because I'm a writer. I think it's mesmerizing. It's like a little bit dreamy. It's like having a dream, becoming and growing, interspersed with some nightmare scenarios, all of it through this veil of lush words and imagery. Also a lot of beats and pauses. I was fascinated by the structure of the writing. I know another playwright who says life happens in the silences and in the beats and pauses. Do you feel that that's?
Yeah, in the space between words, 100%. I mean, the sort of the genesis of this book was that a couple of years ago I was commissioned to write a 12-minute spoken word piece around anything to do with protest, and I was on tour at the time, and I was in Singapore, and I sat in my little hotel room, and it just poured out this feeling that my whole life has been a protest as a butch woman, a butch dyke. What happened to us in the 80s that I don't think people really remember anymore, how we responded, which was even more exciting, and the 90s, and then all of it sort of poured out of me. But then once I got back to London, they decided they want to stage it rather than just have me stood in a corner of the room reading it. And they put me in a boxing ring, which was roped off with barbed wire. They stripped me. That sounds really bad. I had some agency in this. I stripped down to a pair of white boxers and a white vest, and I'm a 54-year-old woman, so it wasn't that flattering. And in the other corner of this boxing ring was my three-piece Donegal blue tweed suit, and throughout it we split each canto, because I wrote in cantos. Each canto was kind of a different round in the boxing ring. And then very quickly Saki Books asked if I wanted to write a poetry collection that kind of included Konto. But as you can see, it just took off inside my head. I think for many of us, there's been so much silence from the butch community and from butch dykes, I think globally. There's a real sense that it's rising again, but butch women live in the silence. We always have. You have to keep your head down. You have to sit downwind. You have to be very careful what you say. So I wanted this book to reflect both the sense of kind of the needing of space, but also, and the absence of our bodies and our presence in terms of TV and culture. But also, a sort of that sense of separation and exile, distance. And that's also why I used a lot of kind of camera shots or stage directions, that sense of being looked at all the time.
Okay. It reads like I can't imagine. I'm not in your position, and so I have, I present as very feminine, so I've not had to I definitely deal with toxic masculinity from a woman, feminine presenting perspective. I imagine it's the same or probably worse in a lot of ways for butch lesbians who have to deal with toxic masculinity from a different angle.
Yeah, it's as though you're a threat. When I was younger, the definite sense was that I was some kind of threat, because you've got... And the thing people don't get about butches, and I've talked to a lot of my butch and stud friends about this, is that we're not actually very masculine. We're masculine presenting. We look like boys, but we're very aware that we're women and that we have female bodies. So what makes us a threat is that we're like cute little boys you can talk to.
Have nice conversations with. There was this one line that I read that said I don't remember it exactly. I hope I get it. Men are broken things, breaking things.
That's it, exactly. Yeah.
So I I was like, wow, yes, that's true across, that's true for, across the
Yeah.
board as
I
the
mean, I
experience.
go into a lot of detail in the book about the kind of toxic masculinity we're speaking of and how that affects you on a really casual level growing up, but then very, I talk a little bit about sexual terrorism, which I think, it's quite a strong phrase to use, strong word, but by that I mean really small things as well. I've never been wolf whistled walking down the street, but most women I know have. And it's that kind of constant sense, again, of being observed. Like I say, there's always a narrator. No matter where I'm going, somebody's always... Sometimes it's really simple. Like the other day I was walking down the street and a man literally walked past me and said, lesbian. Not in an offensive way, necessarily. It was just like he was like playing I Spy.
Probably moves his lips when he reads, would be my guess. I want to also say that I appreciate you providing a glossary of terms to help orient people who are outside of the culture and are reading your work. And I recommend this work for, this is the cover, this is what it looks like, everybody. I recommend it for straight people too. This is a story about we'll get into that next, but I recommend it for everybody. So it's great that at the beginning of the book there is a glossary of slang and terms.
I was very fortunate in that the Poet Laureate of the UK, Simon Armitage, invited me over our lockdown to go to the British Library and read with him from Konto. So that I was I'm pretty sure he didn't quite know what the book was called or what I was going to be actually saying, but he it framed it immediately as something that was accessible to all people. The story is quite universal. It's a story of exile and then belonging, and people trying to break that up, trying to make that stop happening. And it focuses on the story of 4 friends who meet in a bar called the Maryville, and it's one particular night, and what happens to the women and how they come together. And it was a very peculiar time, the late 80s and 90s, certainly in London. We had no idea that what we were doing was revolutionary, but the rebel dykes were changing the world quietly, from South London, and the rest of us were changing the world in these dirty little bars that we frequented, and we found each other. But the most important thing we did is we sat down by ourselves each night, and we met ourselves, and we belonged. And I feel 254 spaces have closed in London where we used to meet. And this means there's one lesbian bar left in the whole of London. One. And it's on Compton Street. There are a couple of club nights, which is amazing that those still exist. But we had infinite spaces that we could go to. And one of my feelings, Heather, is like all of the issues online within and without the LGBTQ plus community would be easily resolved if we had our damn space back, because we had fights, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of kind of wars and people disagreed, but you were in the same space and you had a common enemy.
What do you suppose is the reason for all of these spaces closing down? We're talking about, of course, in areas that are liberal, we're not talking about countries that outlaw homosexuality.
Yeah, no, in the UK, gay marriage is legal. You're not allowed to lock us up anymore. You could when I was a kid. It happened to many of my friends, and I was put in a psychiatric hospital. It was very, very common. But the main thing is market forces, by which I mean Boris Johnson, by which I mean neoliberalism, neo-capitalism, hyper-individuality. So they're basically, if you want to put their house prices up, you move the gays in. We move in, we clean it up, make your place look lovely. We introduce everybody to cappuccino and Mai Tais. Exactly. And then Johnson just shut the places down. So some gay male places still exist in the bars because there's a lot of... But I even think this is... I doubt my own words on it, really, because I remember them being full. Mm-hmm. I remember these bars being full, and now they are not. And I've talked to younger women in London, younger dykes, about exactly where they are, and they're having house parties. but extreme house parties. They sound fantastic. So in a sense, the lesbian community, the Butch community, is going underground a little bit more.
Well, and do you think maybe some of this, I think it is, but do you think some of this is due to the Trumpism and the Borisism?
Oh yeah.
Because it's dangerous.
They've wound everybody up.
We had a big shooting here in America. In the States, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Yes, I was asked to write a poem to commemorate that recently. Yeah. I mean, you know, the trouble we had in the UK getting the media to acknowledge that was an act of terrorism. And, you know, in fact, I doubt they still even think it is. But, yeah, I mean, things have, in my view, we've had I think of this time, the 80s and 90s, as the golden age of the gay. It's when we all believed ourselves and we had no one else and everyone hated us. And so we came together and we did some incredible things. Lesbians abseiled into the Houses of Parliament, for God's sake, during Section 28. Other lesbians ran into the BBC studios. You can see all this on YouTube. And I remember it happening. It's something like the 9 o'clock news. Suddenly two lesbians run in to the 9 o'clock news, big news program in the UK. Everybody watches, and they were shouting, "And Section 28 votes for women." It was just a really astonishing period of time. A lot of us came from Greenham Common, where you're protesting ostensibly about cruise and missiles, but we were protesting against patriarchy, all of it, the whole damn thing. Yeah, and I think then we got our legal rights in the UK, which I know has never been consistent across the states, but we did. And there was a period of time where nobody asked if I was a boy or a girl at all. They were just like, lesbian, like my man the other day, you know, and that's great. Yeah. Wicked. But now we've had several murders. We're only a small country. We've had several murders of gay men, physical attacks on lesbians. But it started to get really, really worrying. Things we've not seen for a long time. And it's the rise of the right wing. And it's the way that the rise of the right wing validates
misogyny and patriarchy and all that stuff.
There you go.
So do you think that we have now, after the pandemic is over, which fingers crossed, people will get their vaccinations, and we'll get some treatments that work really well, that there could be a renaissance of clubs, and people could start to, I think that's a great idea to look at having these safe spaces again for people to gather.
I think it's vital. I mean, we didn't used to come out, you know, when the out bit was the important bit, get out. So it wasn't a kind of, you know, you've seen the Demi Lovato and the celebrities sort of coming out, and there's no trumpets or unicorns or any of that. It's literally a slam door. You're gone, you've lost your family, deal with it. Where you're gonna go? And where we went was toward each other, attracted, you know, little magnets attracted to one another. And I was very lucky we had spaces like the Lesbian and Gay Centre, which now might be called the Queer Centre. And it's a space where you could have community meetings, activism. There was a club downstairs. You could get coffee. You could just be really gay, you know, and in casual wear. So that, whereas in other clubs, you might have to kind of dress up or whatever, dressing code. And the bars, like the Maryville, is based on several of the bars I used to hang out in. And they were as much a post office, a community centre, as a place you went to meet women or get drunk or meet your mates. We didn't have phones, like mobile phones or internet or email. What you did was say, "I'll see you Wednesday." And then you were there. Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I think that's still. Yesterday, when Facebook and Instagram were down, now don't get me wrong, I use them a lot. I appreciate them for what they can do in terms of reaching out to people. If not for those, maybe I would not have met you through your agent. So, that being said, I was like, what? It made me think of what it could be possible if we just put it down for a minute. We don't have to get rid of it, but what if we did just walk outside and go, hey, I'm going to meet you here. Now, it is nice to have the texting thing, but just just make the plan and do it. And I think that's,
because I think this it's a part of hyper individualism, isn't it? Which we all subscribe to.
America's really bad about it.
I can imagine. Even the most sort of Zen Buddhist is bound to look at a video of his mate being more Zen Buddhist than him, and then you're like, here comes your stress.
Yep.
Me and my partner, my wife Marie, have decided we're having book evenings where we get together and we don't turn on a popular streaming thing, but like just crack open a book, because we're trying to make ourselves, I think we're all becoming more and more ADHD, inability to focus, and to be reasonable.
I think it's good to have small, like I had created on Facebook a private group of women authors and publishing professionals that were closest to me, so I could have old-fashioned writing salons. We could just sit down and get in a living room and sit down in a very formal way. And of course, pandemic squelched that. So then I went to virtual, which thank goodness we could do that. But I'm really looking forward to getting back to that communion of being with a person, that regular networking can't do. And I think that's also, you've toured everywhere. So like, it's nice to talk to you this way. I'm hoping you're going to come to DC at some point.
I'd love to come to DC. There's a slight opportunity, but as it is at the moment, it's very difficult to confirm any other countries. I'm waiting. Yeah. Thailand just went to a red country, and I was planning to go there in December. So the problem with it being a red country in the UK is you can go there and do. Who cares about quarantining in a pool villa in Thailand? We can all do that. That's easy. But it means when you come back to the UK, you have 2 weeks quarantine in a really rough hotel that costs something like $6,000. It's very expensive.
Is red right now? Is USA red? I bet we are. Because we have all those people who won't vaccinate.
Yeah, do. I couldn't wait to get my vaccinations. I'm going to do a booster. I'm going to be triple vaxxed, because I like you said, it's important when we have work to share or books to share, that we get out there and meet people and actually physically meet them as well, and try and find new audiences. And if I'm doing that, I need to know that I'm not bringing back anything a bit spooky, and I'm not taking anything spooky into the community. So I've got to really take a lot of vaccine things, the tests.
We do have some venues here that require vaccination and masks for the events. I don't know.
Yeah, we've got vaccine passports too. And what happens in those spaces, what I found is, because I just did the South Bank Centre last week, is you create a bubble, so then nobody's wearing masks, everyone's chill. Because everybody's been vaccinated, everybody's had a little PCR test as they wander in, so everybody's negative, and it's not like it was, but it's kind of, it's getting there, and everybody's got this sense of elation about them, in audiences, just like the elation probably of bravery coming out again. And I think we were all very scared to begin with. So we know how important community is, which is really at the heart of Konto, what it's all about.
And I, speaking of the title of your book, can you tell me now? I figured out a little bit about why it's named Kunto, but just illustrate it for us. Why Kunto? And
I'll read you what the epigraph says.
Okay.
This is absolutely true. Konto, inflection of contrary, third person singular past historic. Contrary, to narrate, tell, or recount a story. It means to recount a very personal story, but it doesn't really come from that. What happened was, I wrote a series of cantos. A canto is a kind of small poem. You put them all together, it makes an epic poem, like Dante's Inferno or Lady of the Lake by Walter Scott. Whoever it was, but basically a very long poem broken up into smaller poems. Each poem is quite distinct within itself, but when you read them in the right order, it creates a narrative. That's the general idea. So at the beginning, I started, as you know, the one I was first commissioned to write. I started writing cantos, and it was a joke with a friend of mine, where I called them contos because they're about women.
Right.
And then it just stuck. And then there was a big battle about changing the name of the book, because I was like, I can't call it this. I cannot call it this book.
Right, and we've got the
plus sign from the LGBT. So, I mean, you know, part of me was thinking, this is really crass. Why am I using an in-joke? And I tried to change the name, but wherever we went, people were like, no, we prefer that and stand up for yourself. And then I discovered it was an actual word. And as soon as I discovered it was Latin, I was like, right, there we go. So that's it, really. It's a kind of, it's the evolution of the book. A
little bit of a play on words with
yeah.
And,
when I was on the BBC recently, they called it C+nto, which really made me laugh.
I was curious because when I first saw it, I was like, I know that's not C+. I know that means something. I'm going to have to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
I think this is a good way to handle it. And of course, it's Kunto and Othered Poems instead of the other poems, assumingly because lesbians, gay people are othered all the time. And
yeah, 100%. And you know, more so the more kind of niche you get within that identity, or that it feels strange to talk about as an identity. I've never thought of it as an identity. It's who I am.
Yeah.
Then I guess that's your identity.
I'm kind of the fat, confident person, so I understand what you like. I'm just trying to live my life, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes being, you know, trying to be a little sexy and being plus size and being confident can be a contradiction to people. And so then she's like, I'm like living the fat, confident person. So, and I'm like, well, yes, I guess that could be described, you know, that way. But I'm just who I am.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's an interesting philosophical point that you only really understand. You know, there's a poem in the book called Black Triangle, which is about what happened to lesbians under the Nazis. And the last line is something like, there are 3 sides to a triangle: you, your lover, and whoever is watching you. You know, and I think there's a real, the sense of being narrated, even yourself as a bisexual woman, that sense of being narrated, I think is quite profound throughout our experience of life.
Yeah. And I think that possibly people might misunderstand, like, this book being called Konto, written by Butch lesbian. They might assume this book is all about sex, but there is a lot in this. I mean, it is a lot about sex.
Well, no,
and desire,
that's interesting. You see that because there might be a couple of references to it, but that's actually at the end of the book. I thought, oh, I didn't write anything about desire or sex, because really it's about the 4 butch women, how they relate to one another, how they relate to themselves, and how they relate to this knocking on the other side of the door, these people trying to get into this space. It's a very common experience in gay clubs.
The sensuality of it, because this is a very, maybe in my mind, the desire side of it is like, this has a lot of sensuality to it, even though it's also got a lot of brutality, because that's your experience, sensuality, brutality, both sides of that. But this book is about way more than sex, or it's even way more than just about sexual identity. And though it does have some historical lessons in here about the triangle, also something that I ended up looking up that I was unaware of, about the 3 pieces of clothing.
Article 3,
Article 3, which I did not know about, and so then that sent me down a rabbit hole. Your book sent me down so many
rabbit holes,
Google searches.
But I think it's important to have these testaments as well, because remember, this is memoir, as much as I made a story up, but it's based on real things. Memoir, conjecture, and it's magical as well. It's set inside a vitrine, set inside a museum display case, so it's got a lot of magic to it as well. But Article 3 is, you know, in England, right, I couldn't order a pint of cider or a pint of lager, because as a woman you can have a half pint. People forget that within our lifetimes this was real. Article 3 was if you were not, you had to prove you were wearing 3 items of women's clothing, and women were publicly stripped, and they were stripped in the gay bars, so butchers were humiliated in a very deliberate way. And there's some conjecture that's what was happening with Stormy Delavery that night of the Stonewall riots, so it's a very kind of what better way to reduce someone to nothing than to strip them?
Yes. Yeah, it's awful to think about. And I think that, and you have nice little notes at the top of the section so that you can just like this is what this is about, just a small amount, but it helps us keep in our memory. This is a memoir, a history book, a play, it's poems, it's all of those things, and it's not long, but it's just packed with so much stuff. And I'm gonna before we move on to the next question, I just want to say, can I tell you some of my favorite spots in the book?
Sure.
Okay. So page 77 with the description of Jack Catch.
Oh yeah.
Entering the room. That to me was, so if anybody picks this book up, just so you know, that's one of my favorite entries. There's just something so, the way you describe it, and again with the pauses and the slashes. I'm not a poetry writer, so I don't know the proper terminology for these things, so I apologize for that, but I can understand why they're there. When I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, this is giving me pause between these moments. But when you have bigger spaces, so tell me the difference between why when you have a slash versus when you have, like, some places you have nice big spaces.
Yeah, okay. So that's the absence. That's the difference. So the forward slash is a kind of musical thing, but it's also used quite a lot in theatre as well. If you're using it in theatre, it would indicate someone's interrupting someone.
Okay.
So there's that sense. I'm trying to mix two things together. So there's a sense that the memories are interrupting themselves as you're going through. So it gives it a bit of pace, but also this gives it its musicality. I could show you by just reading one.
That would be great. I have, there's whichever one of these three, page 89, scene 8 is another one, and page 93, Legend of the First Butch, was inspired. It was those are my 3 favorite. If you wanted to read one of those, I would enjoy that. Okay, well, so what page did you say? 77, 89, or 93. All right, let's find Jack Catch. Jack Catch was just, the description was so good. All right. Sorry about this, won't be a second. I'd lined up something different, but you've persuaded me. You can read what you would like, which you already lined up if you want. I found it. I have found it. Okay. So I just knocked my glass over. Right, so this is called Jack Catch, Teachers at the Old School. And throughout the book, there are 4 characters. There's Jack Catch, who's the elder. And then there is Dudzilly, who's a stud in her 30s, and Valentine, who's another stud, kind of leather butch, and there's Angel, who's a very young white butch, quite aggressive. Anyway, this is Jack Catch. Jack Catch, in a houndstooth suit, oxblood brogues, knitted tie, sharpens the air she walks through. The room sucks its stomach in, tries not to look. She can undo a bar with one hand, old school, preserved in the amber of lager. Maryville is aspic, fixing all the silverbacks at 7:32 p.m. 1995. Hair you could picnic on, bring the family, aftershave, a happy man. The music has been remembering its childhood, scratching its hazy outline for hours, when Soho
and her girls, the side streets slung around their necks as feather boas slide in on silk, each wearing her mother pinned to her breast, pearls, low-hanging fruit. And the old boys stop talking, each afraid of her own face, that it might eat her. But Jack Catch stands, pulls a chair out of her sleeve, tips the barman, taps a cigarette to stand out from the others, and when Soho asks for a light, she is speaking of forgiveness. And when Jack opens her Zippo, she is showing how easy it is to burn, how aspic dissolves. And now the silverbacks look towards saloon doors that never open. Young things, Eddie and Glamour, are paintings of themselves. And old Jack Catch straightens the crease in her hound's tooth, says, Jesus, are all women female impersonators? Says, everything is running back inside. There are new words for words. And surveying the club mutters, I remember when all of this was a loose stone in a wall. Thank you.
So good. So good. It was as good as I thought it was going to be. Did you want to read the thing that you had selected?
Yeah, why not?
While we're on a roll reading, and I can ask the other questions after.
Yeah, sure enough. So let's have a look. I was going to do Angel's poem. And Angel, like I said, is a very aggressive, young, white Butch. All of these Butches,
these are in the glossary for people who are unfamiliar with these terminologies. Oh. It's right in the front in the glossary. So,
what was I going to say about that?
I'm sorry.
Oh, something. Hang on, I'll find it. Where are we? There we are. Back into Maryville.
Okay.
So yeah, she's a young Butch psych. Been through quite a lot of violence, but the other Butches, the other characters, take care of her a lot. And in the stage play, the whole thing is really around Angel.
Okay.
Angel. When Angel looks in the mirror, it looks away first. Star fist, open jaw. How the shine becomes you, clean friend, taller than yesterday's spine, an unraveling plot you, odd insistence, my king of the blue tattoo. Eyebrow pinned Prince Butterfly, when you walked in the room, it became you. How you brought the silence in with you, how you brought the night to its knees, back there where the quiet ones go, and now the night won't stop texting. How many times have we walked home, you and I, only to find home walking softly behind us? I have seen you leap over language to push a man back inside himself, throw pint glasses like seeds, speak to every woman as though she were your mother. I have seen your fists sob. At the center of every boy is a bare room, and inside a swinging light bulb, a wire thin girl dances, stays with you, even when you look away. Angels don't fall from heaven. They leave at closing time. Unscrew their fucks in the backs of black cabs. Abandon their bodies beneath a girl, beneath a duvet, beneath the wet, dilated night, on fire. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing. I feel like there's so many moments in this book that people will relate to, even if they are not part of this particular culture, because it's so much about the human condition. But if you are part of this culture, you absolutely have to get this book. It's like your bookshelf would not be complete without it. And even with say in terms of the glossary, I am part of the LGBTQ community, and I wasn't even familiar with some of these terms in here. And I in some ways I was learning while I was reading this, and it's almost like I said before, almost a history book too, besides being a memoir and a play. We are at 2:30. Do you want to wrap it up, or do you have a minute to answer 2 more questions?
I can answer some more questions.
Okay. I have a few more. I wondered, when did you start writing poetry?
I mean, I think I got into poetry through music. So as a very young kid, primary school kid, I started rewriting lyrics from people like Bob Dylan or whoever was, whatever caught my 9-year-old mind's, attention. So I've always written. And then I got more. By the age of 15, I was going on stages as a way of bypassing literary gatekeepers. I was part of the punk movement in the UK, and that allowed a lot of working class kids to sort of forge their own pathways, and for a very brief moment in time, it was actually really cool and glamorous to be poor and to make our own clothes and to make our own stages and to make all these things. So like in terms of poetry being part of that whole vibe, that whole ethic, that was central to me. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the poems grew into plays and then returned to poems and then became novels and then returned again. So I think there's always this conversation between all the different forms. But yeah, I was born a Butch poet. That's what they told my mum.
And how does your mum feel about that?
Unfortunately, my mum's passed on, but I can hear her laughing. I always think of her as a kind of drag queen, this whole idea of women who impersonate themselves, So
to turn it a little bit more serious, in the USA this past weekend, we had a march for abortion rights, and it got me because I was in the middle of reading your book a second time. I began to wonder how butch culture and lesbian butch culture specifically is affected by reproductive rights. Now, presumably, you're not having, relationships with men, so you're not getting pregnant generally. But I know it's so much more complicated than that. So I wondered, what could you tell us about
I think it's a really astute question. In terms of, because let's just look at me. So the butch will spend her whole life looking for her body. That's the proposition of the book. It's what I believe about myself. I had to have a hysterectomy to remove tumours. And I'd had these tumours for over a decade and only got them removed when I couldn't really fit my suits anymore because they were measuring me and how pregnant I was, basically, with these fibroids. And when I went to get the consultation, they told me, we're going to have to remove your uterus and your ovaries and your cervix. And I was fine till they got to cervix. And then I was like, I kind of know what that is. Oh my God, I don't know where it is. What is going from my body? So I think there's a disconnection from our bodies, even though I'm very clear I'm female, that's what I am, but I never really felt in terms of the stereotype female. And I think, I think the reason the lesbian community, whether they have sex with men or not, or whether they choose to have babies or not, rather, has always been supportive of reproductive rights in women because it's correct. It's the correct way to be. I think if you're butch and you are pregnant, or maybe it's not even about pregnancy and abortion. It's about, are you going for your, what do you call them, PAP?
Yeah,
tests. We
you're,
call them
yeah,
smears. Yeah.
yeah.
Are you looking after your body? You have this female body,
Hmm.
you know, no matter what we wear. That's
Right.
that's under everything. So I think there's always been a disconnection for butch women from generalized female, healthcare, because
Right.
perhaps you don't quite see yourself in the same way, perhaps because
Did,
it doesn't look like us.
so would you say, and I know this is generalizing, but would you say that butch lesbians in general don't think about having children or
Well, I would have
reproducing?
said that at one point, but I've learned a lot recently. I made a Radio 4 program called Butch, and I interviewed lots of different contemporary butches as well as old school, like older butches like myself.
Mhm.
And I think you can give birth if you want to.
Right.
I think the word butch has become quite malleable.
Yeah, gender fluidity is a lot more acceptable now,
Yeah.
and I think it's not to say easier to be butch, but it is less. You're not constantly fighting everybody. At least there are general.
Yeah, and we've had, there's often a sort of conflation between trans men and butch women, and obviously there's a lot of difference. I think I was telling you earlier, and then I got sidetracked by myself, interrupted myself, that I've always been described as very maternal and motherly, and believe me, I don't look it. Genuinely, well, you can see me, but my attitude, I wouldn't have thought is so, but it is. Like the four butches in the book are watching the whole club all the time. There's a maternal energy throughout it. So it's contradiction incarnate. That's
Right.
what we are.
There's so many layers. There's so many. There's each. It is hard to generalize because each person is a world unto themselves, and they've had their own experience. They might have had a lot of support or no support. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say where they may land on something. So I did have a personal question that I was curious about when I was reading this about you as you personally. Would you say your heart is easy to break or hard to break?
Easy.
Easy.
I think I'm quite naive.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm married for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I constantly walked into kind of duh. Situations, and I think women do. You know yourself. You enter a relationship with a woman in a very honest and open. Absolutely, we have this joke in the UK that gay men go cottaging. You know what that is?
No.
Okay, cottaging is when you meet men in toilets and have sex.
Okay.
Call it cottaging, whereas lesbian cottaging is literally buying a cottage on the first date.
Well, maybe it's just a matter of finding somebody you connect with and that doesn't you feel safe in that space together, and once you find it, it's like, I'm afraid to lose this, you don't want to.
I think heart, every heart breaks, but it's kintsugi, isn't it? So wherever it breaks, there's a little bit of gold solder sealing it, and
Wabi sabi.
Yes, is that what you call it? What do you call it?
Wabi sabi. When the Japanese fix a broken vessel with gold. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Actual word.
Yeah. This has been such a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on and joining our book festival. I hope that you will, if not this year, maybe next year, when probably the U.S. will still be a red zone. But if you come out to D.C., I will be watching your website for tour information.
Brilliant.
And I do encourage everybody to go read your biography on your bio on your page, because it's full of all kinds of things that you're involved with and awards that you've won. And I think that you're a pillar of the community in terms of helping LGBTQ youth. And even with this book, I think this is going to become a tome that is a necessary read for anybody that is living in that culture. The other thing I wanted to mention is that in the back of your book here, I marked it with a blue tab. Folks, if you want to go, there's QR codes. You can it works. I used it. You can go watch some performances. And there's also a list of 90s, a playlist of 90s music that goes along with this.
And that's being added to my website next week.
Okay.
My launch is happening this week.
For that. So 90s music that kind of sets the mood for this, for Konto and Othered Poems by Joelle Taylor. And I will make sure I put all the links in there. If any new links come in, I'll go edit it and add them as well. I wanted to ask, can U.S. theaters and directors obtain rights to this? And
I think probably, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my publisher works in the US and my agents are United agents, so yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, you can.
That's very cool. And I will link also Barnes & Noble. We are partnered with Barnes & Noble this year at a local Bowie Barnes & Noble in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I will reach out to them and see if they can't carry this in store.
Fantastic.
And also I work in the DuPont Circle area, which is very LGBTQ friendly, and I will see if there's a little bookstore. I know a little bookstore over there that might be able to carry this as well if they don't already. In fact, I was going to call. I didn't have time this morning. I was going to call and see if anybody had it in stock, and if they don't, I'm going to go ahead and suggest it because I think that this should be easily accessible. And I hope to see more of you in America. And I'll put the link to the since Barnes & Noble is partnered with us, I'm going to put the link to the Barnes & Noble online ability to purchase this. I was going to do a giveaway with this, but I'm keeping this for myself. And I'm hoping that when you do come to tour in DC that I'll get it signed. So thank you again for your energy and your spirit and your fortitude. I mean, I know we get tired of having to be strong, right? We just get sick of it. I have a friend who says, thanks resiliency, but I'm tired, It's just like, yeah, exactly. We don't want to have to constantly be so resilient. So I'm glad that you're finding joy, because even as I was watching you read some of these, I was like, there's still, even though so much of this is about struggle, there's still so much joy in there too, and celebration at least of life and becoming. So thank you for that.
Thank you.